The problem with humans, Lieutenant Krell decided while watching the new cadet stumble through the airlock, was that they looked fragile. Everything about them screamed temporary existence. Soft skin that bruised under a strong handshake. Bones that snapped if you leaned on them wrong. Eyes that watered when you spoke too loudly. This particular human looked especially breakable. She stood maybe 5.5 feet tall, which put her at chest height to most of the other species in the Galactic Defense Academy. Her hair was pulled back in what Krell had learned was called a ponytail, dark brown and unremarkable. She wore the standard-issue cadet uniform, which hung on her frame like it was designed for someone twice her size. Her hands gripped the straps of her duffel bag so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. "Name?" Krell asked, not looking up from his datapad. "Olivia Reeves, sir. Reporting for basic combat training. 4th rotation." Her voice was steady, at least. Krell would give her that much. He glanced up, his 4 eyes focusing on her in sequence. She didn't flinch. Good. The last human cadet had actually screamed when he made direct eye contact. "You understand that the mortality rate for humans in BCT is approximately 47%? Krell asked. It was protocol to inform them. The Terran government insisted on it. "Yes, sir. I've been informed." "And you still want to proceed?" "Yes, sir." Krell sighed, a sound that came out like hydraulics releasing pressure. "Locker room is down the hall. 3rd door on your right. Formation is in 30 minutes. Do not be late. The instructors here do not appreciate tardiness, and they appreciate human fragility even less." Olivia nodded and walked past him, her footsteps barely making a sound on the metal floor. Krell watched her go, then returned his attention to his datapad. Another human. They kept sending them, and they kept breaking. It was almost sad. Almost. The locker room smelled like metal and ozone and something else that Olivia couldn't quite identify. Probably fear, she thought, and almost laughed at herself. The rows of lockers stretched out before her, each one marked with a designation code. She found hers near the back, next to a locker that was already open. A Vrexian stood there, all 8 feet of scaled muscle and attitude. She had heard about them in the orientation videos. Apex predators from a high-gravity world. Built like tanks, and twice as mean. This one was female, judging by the crest that ran along her skull. She was pulling on her training gear, paying no attention to Olivia whatsoever. "Hey," Olivia said, because she was an idiot who apparently had a death wish. The Vrexian's head swiveled toward her, eyes narrowing. "What?" "I'm Olivia. Your new locker neighbor, I guess." The Vrexian stared at her for a long moment, then snorted. It was a sound like a small explosion. "Great. Another human. Try not to die in the first week, yeah? The smell takes forever to get out of the lockers." "I'll do my best," Olivia said dryly. She opened her locker and began unpacking. The Vrexian went back to suiting up, apparently done with the conversation. Olivia pulled out her gear, piece by piece. Standard-issue training armor designed to fit multiple species. It would be too big on her, like everything else in this place. Combat boots that could probably fit another person inside them along with her feet. A helmet that rattled when she picked it up. And then, at the bottom of her bag, wrapped in cloth that had been in her family for 3 generations, was something that definitely wasn't standard issue. She unwrapped it carefully, feeling the familiar weight settle into her palm. The blade was maybe 14 inches long, single-edged, with a slight curve. The handle was wrapped in worn cord, dark with age and use. The metal had a pattern to it, waves and lines that caught the light. "What is that?" Olivia looked up. The Vrexian was staring at the blade, her expression somewhere between confusion and contempt. It's called a katana, Olivia said. Well, technically it's a wakizashi, because of the length, but most people just say katana. A sword? The Rexian laughed, a harsh barking sound. You brought a sword to the Galactic Defense Academy? What are you going to do? Challenge the training bots to a duel? It's from Earth, Olivia said, keeping her voice level. It's been in my family for 200 years. My great-great-grandfather carried it. My grandmother carried it. My mother carried it. Now I do. Your great-great-grandfather must have been an idiot. Other cadets were starting to gather now, drawn by the commotion. A Keller with too many arms, a Thrinn who had to duck to fit under the doorframe, a Mix whose form kept shifting slightly, like water trying to hold a shape. They all stared at the blade in Olivia's hand, and then they all started laughing. A primitive cutting implement, the Keller said, his translator giving his words a stilted quality. How quaint. Does it even have an energy cell? The Thrinn asked, leaning down to peer at it. Or is it just metal? Just metal, Olivia confirmed. More laughter. The Vrexian shook her head and finished strapping on her armor. You're going to get yourself killed, human. First combat scenario, you'll be cut in half by a plasma blade, and all you'll have is that antique to remember your stupid ancestors by. Maybe, Olivia said. She wrapped the blade back up and placed it carefully in the bottom of her locker. Or maybe not. Oh, this is going to be good, the Mix said, its voice bubbling with amusement. I give her 3 days. 4, if she's lucky. 2 days, the Keller said. Humans always overestimate their abilities. I've got a better bet, the Rexian said. I bet she doesn't even make it through morning drills. She'll cry and quit before lunch. Olivia finished putting on her training gear, ignoring them all. The armor sat wrong on her frame. Gaps where there shouldn't be gaps. Pressure where there shouldn't be pressure. She cinched the straps as tight as they would go. It would have to do. The formation was held in what the Academy called the assembly deck, which was really just a massive open space with a floor that could shift and change depending on what kind of training was scheduled. Right now it was flat, marked with lines that divided the cadets into their various units. Olivia stood in formation with 47 other cadets from a dozen different species. She was the only human. The others towered over her, blocked her view, made her feel like a child standing in a crowd of adults. She kept her eyes forward and her mouth shut. Instructor Vax entered from the far door. He was Kellor, like the cadet who had mocked her sword, but older, bigger. His exoskeleton was scarred and dented, marks of combat that had been earned rather than simulated. He had 6 arms, and each one looked like it could bend steel. His eyes, all 4 of them, swept across the formation with the kind of contempt that only comes from seeing 1,000 cadets and being disappointed by every single one. Welcome to basic combat training, Vax said, his voice amplified by the room's acoustic system. Most of you will fail. Some of you will quit. A few of you will die, though we try to minimize that these days. The Galactic Defense needs soldiers, but it needs competent soldiers, and most of you are not competent. You are soft, you are slow, you are weak. My job is to fix that, or to break you trying. He began walking down the line, inspecting each cadet. He stopped in front of the Thrinn, looked him up and down, and nodded. Moved on to the Mix, paused, then continued. When he reached Olivia, he stopped. A human, he said flatly. Yes, sir. Do you know how many humans have graduated from this academy? 37, sir, out of 214 who have attempted. And do you know why the success rate is so low? Because humans are physically weaker than most species in the galactic defense, sir. Correct. Vax leaned down, bringing his face close to hers. His breath smelled like copper and ozone. So tell me, Cadet, why are you here? It was a trap question. Olivia knew it was a trap question. If she said she was here to prove humans could do it, she would sound arrogant. If she said she didn't know, she would sound stupid. If she said anything about honor or duty, she would sound naive. So she told the truth instead. Because someone has to be, sir. Vax stared at her for a long moment. Then he straightened up and continued down the line without another word. The first week was hell. Not the kind of hell that burned. The kind that ground you down slowly, like stone against metal, wearing away everything soft until only the core remained. Drills started at 500 and ended when Vax decided they were done, which was never before 2200 and sometimes went until midnight. Running, climbing, lifting, fighting, over and over until muscles screamed and lungs burned and every part of Olivia's body begged her to stop. She didn't stop. The other cadets were faster, stronger, bigger. The Vrexian whose locker was next to hers, whose name turned out to be Grix, could run the obstacle course in half the time it took Olivia. The Thrin could lift weights that Olivia couldn't even move. The Kellor could take hits that would have shattered Olivia's bones. But Olivia didn't quit. At night, while the others recovered in their bunks, she went back to her locker. She unwrapped the blade. She held it, felt the weight of it, remembered the stories her grandmother had told her. About her great-great-grandfather, who had carried it through the Unification Wars. About her grandmother, who had used it to defend a colony from raiders. About her mother, who had never needed to draw it, but who had kept it sharp anyway, just in case. The metal was old, but it was still sharp, still balanced, still perfect. "You're insane," Grix said one night, watching Olivia practice forms in the small space between their bunks. "That thing is useless. You know that, right? One plasma blade, and it would melt." "Probably," Olivia agreed. She moved through the forms her grandmother had taught her, muscle memory older than her conscious thought. "But it hasn't melted yet." "Because you haven't fought anyone yet," Grix pointed out. "Wait until the combat scenarios start. You'll see." The combat scenarios started in week 3. They were held in the sim deck, a space that could create any environment, any enemy, any situation the instructors wanted. The cadets were divided into pairs and given objectives: capture the flag, hold the position, eliminate the targets, standard military exercises, but with real consequences. The weapons were set to training mode, which meant they wouldn't kill you, but they would hurt. A lot. Olivia was paired with a mix named Torv, who had spent the last 3 weeks making jokes about how quickly she would fail. They were given a simple objective: clear a building of hostile targets and extract a package from the top floor. "Try not to slow me down," Torv said as they entered the simulation. The building materialized around them, all concrete and shadows and corners where enemies could hide. Olivia had her standard-issue plasma rifle, which felt heavy and clumsy in her hands. Torv moved forward, his form shifting to blend with the walls, and Olivia followed. The first hostile appeared on the second floor. Torv took it out before Olivia even saw it. The second hostile came from behind a door. Torv got that one too. They moved up floor by floor, Torv leading and Olivia just trying to keep up. And then, on the 4th floor, everything went wrong. The door exploded inward, and 6 hostiles poured through, more than the scenario was supposed to have. Torv was caught off guard, took a plasma bolt to the chest, and went down hard. The simulation registered him as incapacitated. Dead weight. Olivia dove behind a pillar as plasma fire filled the air. Her rifle was almost out of charge. She had maybe 2 shots left, and there were 6 targets. The math didn't work. She dropped the rifle. The hostiles advanced, moving to flank her position. Olivia reached into her belt, where she had attached something that definitely wasn't regulation gear. She unwrapped the blade, and the metal sang as it came free. The first hostile came around the pillar, expecting to find an unarmed cadet. Instead, it found 14 inches of folded steel, moving faster than its sensors could track. Olivia cut through its weapon hand, then reversed the strike and took out its knee. The hostile went down. The second hostile fired. Olivia was already moving, inside its guard, too close for the plasma rifle to track. The blade found the gap in its armor, the weak point at the neck joint. Not deep enough to kill in real life, but enough to make the simulation register a critical hit. The third and fourth came together. Olivia ducked under the first one's swing, used its momentum to push it into the fourth, then struck both while they were tangled. 2 more down. The fifth hostile was smarter. It backed away, keeping distance, trying to get a clear shot. Olivia threw the pillar between them, closing the gap before it could fire. The blade caught its weapon, knocked it aside, and then found its torso. Down. The last hostile didn't even try to fight. It turned and ran. Olivia let it go. She had the package. The objective was complete. She bent down and hoisted Torv's simulated unconscious form over her shoulders. He was heavier than she expected, but she managed. She carried him and the package down 4 flights of stairs and out of the building, where the simulation ended. The sim deck faded back to its normal gray walls. Torv sat up, no longer simulated unconscious, staring at her with an expression Olivia couldn't quite read. "What just happened?" he asked. "We completed the objective," Olivia said. She was breathing hard, her arms shaking from the effort of carrying him. "You're welcome." "With a sword? You cleared 5 hostiles with a sword?" "6, technically. 1 ran away." Torv opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. No words came out. The other cadets had been watching on monitors. When Olivia and Torv emerged from the sim deck, they were all staring. The Keller who had made fun of her sword looked like someone had told him his entire species had just lost a war. Grix was shaking her head slowly, like she couldn't quite believe what she had seen. And then Instructor Vax walked into the room. Everyone snapped to attention. Vax's 4 eyes swept across the assembled cadets, then focused on Olivia. He walked toward her, his 6 arms moving with a grace that belied his size. "Cadet Reeves," he said. "Yes, sir?" "That blade you used in the simulation, where did you get it?" "It's a family heirloom, sir. I brought it from Earth." "Show me." Olivia unwrapped the blade and held it out, handle first, in a gesture of respect her grandmother had taught her. Vax took it carefully, his manipulator hands surprisingly gentle. He examined the metal, the edge, the balance. His expression changed slowly, from curiosity to something else. Something that looked almost like respect. "This is authentic," he said quietly. "Old Earth forging techniques, folded steel, pattern welding. This is not a replica." "No, sir. It belonged to my great-great-grandfather." Vax turned the blade over, and then he froze. His 4 eyes focused on a point near the handle, where the metal met the cord wrap. There was something there, faint but visible if you knew where to look. A marking. "This symbol," Vax said, his voice suddenly very different. "Do you know what it means?" "It's my family crest, sir. At least, that's what my grandmother told me." Vax looked up at her, and for the first time since she had arrived at the academy, Olivia saw something in an instructor's eyes that wasn't contempt or amusement or dismissal. She saw recognition. "Your great-great-grandfather," Vax said slowly. "What was his name?" "Marcus Reeves, sir. He fought in the Unification Wars." Vax went very still. Around them, the other cadets were watching, confused. Grix leaned over to the Keller and whispered something. No one understood what was happening. But Vax understood. He held the blade for a moment longer, then carefully, deliberately, he did something that made every cadet in the room gasp. He bowed. Not a small nod. A full, formal bow. The kind reserved for superior officers or visiting dignitaries. He extended the blade back to Olivia, handle first, in the same gesture of respect she had shown him. "That blade has history," Vax said, his voice carrying across the silent room. "Your great-great-grandfather saved my grandfather's life during the Battle of Titan's Ridge. He used that very weapon to cut through a blast door when my grandfather's unit was trapped behind enemy lines. Without him, my entire family line would have ended that day." Olivia took the blade back, her hands suddenly shaking. "I didn't know, sir." "Of course you didn't. It was 80 years ago, and humans have short memories." Vax straightened up, his expression returning to its usual severity. "But Kellor remember. We remember debts, we remember honor, and we remember warriors." He looked around at the other cadets, his 4 eyes blazing. "Let this be a lesson to all of you. Never judge a weapon by its age or a warrior by their size. The human standing before you just cleared a scenario that was designed for advanced cadets, using nothing but a piece of metal and the skills her ancestors taught her. If any of you have something to say about that, say it now." Silence. "Good. Dismissed." The cadets filed out, quiet for once. Grix walked past Olivia and paused, then awkwardly patted her on the shoulder with one massive hand. It nearly knocked Olivia over. "Not bad, human," Grix said. "Not bad at all." Olivia wrapped her blade and returned it to her locker. Her hands were still shaking, but now it was from something other than exhaustion. She had 4 more weeks of training ahead of her. 4 more weeks of drills and scenarios and instructors who would try to break her. 4 more weeks of being smaller, weaker, slower than everyone around her. But she had a blade that had history. And that, she thought, was enough. Week 4 began with what Instructor Vax called Advanced Tactical Scenarios, which was really just code for situations designed to make you question every life choice that led you to the academy. The cadets were divided into squads of 8 and given missions that required actual teamwork instead of just running around shooting things. Olivia found herself assigned to Squad Theta, which included Grix, Torv, the Keller, whose name was Bexin, a quiet Thrin called Morak, and 3 other species she was still learning about. A Quilvan, who moved on 6 legs and had quills that could detect vibrations through walls. A Hess, whose primary trait seemed to be complaining about everything. And a Vorn, who barely spoke but could interface directly with electronic systems using tendrils that extended from his skull. "Great," Bexin muttered when he saw Olivia join the group. "The human with the antique." "The human who cleared the floor 5 scenario by herself," Grix corrected, her tone sharp. "You want to keep talking? Or you want to maybe shut up and learn something?" Bexin shut up. Their first mission was a hostage extraction on a simulated space station that was supposedly falling apart after a reactor breach. They had 15 minutes to locate 3 hostages, neutralize unknown hostiles, and evacuate before the whole structure exploded. The catch was that their standard weapons would cause hull breaches if they missed, so they had to use non-lethal takedowns, which meant Olivia's blade was suddenly the most useful weapon in the squad. "You have got to be kidding me," the Hess said, staring at her. His name was Plek, and he had been complaining since the moment they met. "We're supposed to trust our lives to a human with a sword." "You're supposed to trust your lives to your squad," Morak said quietly. The Thrin's voice was surprisingly gentle for someone who looked like he could headbutt through a starship hull. "Or you can fail alone. Your choice." Plek grumbled but didn't argue further. The simulation loaded. Alarms blared. Red emergency lights flashed. The station groaned around them, metal stressed beyond its limits. Somewhere in the distance, something exploded. "Vorn, find the hostages," Grix ordered, taking command naturally. "Quilven, map the hostile positions. Everyone else, stay tight. We move fast. We move quiet. We get out alive." The Vorn, whose name turned out to be Seth, extended his tendrils into a nearby access panel. His eyes went distant for a moment, then refocused. "Hostages located. Section C, 3 levels up. 12 hostiles between us and them. Various species. Station integrity at 62% and dropping." 12, Plek's voice went up an octave. "We're 8 cadets against 12 trained hostiles? 13 if you keep whining, and I decide to shoot you myself," Grix said pleasantly. "Move out." They moved through the station like they had been doing this for years instead of weeks. The Quilven, who answered to Triss, used her vibration sense to detect hostiles around corners. Seth kept them updated on station integrity and enemy positions. Morak took point, his massive frame absorbing hits that would have dropped anyone else. And Olivia moved through gaps in the enemy formation, like water through cracks. The first hostile was a Keller, ironically enough, stationed at a junction point. Olivia came at him from an angle his sensors didn't cover, her blade finding the weak point in his armor's neck seal. The simulation registered a knockout. He went down without firing a shot. The second and third were clustered near a doorway. Bexon created a distraction, drawing their attention while Olivia slipped past. 2 quick strikes, both non-lethal but precise enough that the simulation counted them as incapacitating hits. Down. "How is she doing that?" Plek whispered, watching from cover as Olivia took out a 4th hostile. "Training," Torv said, his form shimmering slightly. "Real training, from before any of us were born. Humans might be weak, but they have been killing each other with blades for thousands of years. They got pretty good at it." They reached Section C with 8 minutes left on the clock. The hostages were behind a reinforced door, and 6 hostiles were dug in around it with overlapping fields of fire. A frontal assault would get everyone killed. "Ideas?" Grix asked, scanning the area. "The ventilation system," Seth said, still connected to the station's network. "I can reroute airflow, create a pressure differential. It will not incapacitate them, but it will disorient them for approximately 4 seconds. 4 seconds, Morak said thoughtfully. "That is enough." "Enough for what?" Plek demanded. Olivia smiled. It was not a particularly nice smile. "Enough for me to get close." She was already moving before anyone could object, using the shadows and the failing station lights to mask her approach. Seth triggered the pressure differential right as she reached optimal range. The hostiles stumbled, their aim thrown off for just a moment. 4 seconds. Olivia dropped the first hostile with a strike to the knee joint, used his falling body as a shield to close on the second. Her blade found gaps in armor, weak points in defensive positions, angles that the simulation's AI hadn't properly accounted for. She moved like her grandmother had taught her, like her great-great-grandfather had learned in wars before the galaxy knew Earth existed. 3. Hostiles down. 3 seconds left. The fourth hostile recovered faster than the others, bringing his weapon around. Olivia was already inside his guard, too close for the gun to track. She struck his wrist, disarming him, then swept his legs out from under him. The simulation registered the hit as he went down hard. 2 seconds. The fifth hostile fired wildly, missing by inches. Olivia rolled, came up behind him, and delivered a precise strike to the base of his skull. The simulation shut down his nervous system response. He dropped. 1 second. The last hostile was backing toward the door, weapon raised, finger on the trigger. Olivia didn't have time to close the distance. She did the only thing she could think of. She threw the blade. It wasn't designed to be thrown. Katanas, or wakizashis, or whatever specific name applied to this particular piece of folded steel, were cutting weapons, not throwing knives. The balance was wrong. The weight distribution was off. It should have tumbled end over end and clattered uselessly to the floor. Instead, it flew straight and true because Olivia's grandmother had made her practice this exact throw 10,000 times, and muscle memory didn't care about what should or shouldn't work. The blade struck the hostile's weapon hand, knocking the gun aside a split second before he fired. The shot went wide, hitting the wall instead of Olivia's chest. Morak charged forward like a freight train and simply ran the hostile over, securing him with the kind of casual violence that only a Thrin could make look easy. Silence, except for the station's alarms, and the sound of Olivia breathing hard. "Did you just throw a sword?" Plek asked, his voice somewhere between awe and disbelief. "Technically, I threw a wakizashi," Olivia said, retrieving her blade from where it had clattered to the floor after the strike. "And before you ask, no, I cannot do that reliably. I got lucky." "That was not luck," Grix said flatly. "That was insane, but it was not luck." They extracted the hostages with 2 minutes to spare and evacuated the station just as the simulation registered a catastrophic reactor failure. The whole scenario faded back to the gray walls of the sim deck, and Squad Theta stood there, looking at each other with the kind of expressions people get when they realize they just did something they probably shouldn't have survived. Instructor Vax was waiting when they emerged. 13 minutes, 47 seconds, he said, consulting his datapad. That is the third fastest extraction time in Academy history. 0 casualties. All hostages recovered. Minimal collateral damage. He looked up, his 4 eyes focusing on Olivia. And it appears that 86% of hostile neutralizations were performed by a single cadet, using a weapon that officially does not exist in our armory. "Is that a problem, sir?" Olivia asked. Vax was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something Olivia had never seen him do before. He smiled. It was not a particularly reassuring smile, mostly because Keller had too many teeth, but it was definitely a smile. "No, Cadet Reeves, that is not a problem. That is exceptional performance. Your entire squad showed initiative, adaptability, and tactical awareness. Well done." Coming from Vax, that was practically a love letter. The squad stood a little straighter. "However," Vax continued, and everyone's posture deflated slightly, "exceptional performance in simulation means nothing if you cannot replicate it under real conditions, which is why next week you will be participating in the live fire exercise." Plek made a sound like a small animal dying. "The what?" Olivia asked. "Live fire exercise," Grix said quietly, her scales paling slightly. "Real weapons, real enemies, real consequences. They put us against actual combat veterans in a controlled but very dangerous environment. People get hurt, sometimes badly. People die," Bexon added helpfully. Not often, but it happens. The Academy maintains a fully staffed medical facility, Vax said, as if that was supposed to be reassuring. And all participants sign waivers acknowledging the risks. You will have 3 days to prepare. I suggest you use them wisely. Dismissed. The squad filed out, subdued now. Olivia felt a hand on her shoulder, looked up to find Grix staring down at her with an expression that was hard to read. You need to understand something, Grix said. That blade of yours, it worked great in the Sims. The AI doesn't know how to counter it because it is analyzing weapon types it recognizes. But in the live fire exercise, you will be facing real soldiers, veterans. Some of them have been fighting since before your planet joined the galactic defense. They will not be confused by an antique. They will just shoot you. So what do you suggest? Olivia asked. I suggest you train with the rest of us. Learn to use a plasma rifle properly. Learn to take cover, coordinate fire, all the things that keep soldiers alive in real combat. And the blade? Grix hesitated, then sighed. Keep it. But use it smart. Use it when the moment is right, not because you think you have something to prove. Olivia nodded slowly. That's actually good advice. I know. I am full of good advice. You should listen to me more often. The next 3 days were a blur of preparation. Squad Theta trained together every moment they weren't required to be somewhere else. They ran drills, practiced formations, learned each other's rhythms and patterns. Olivia trained with the plasma rifle until her hands remembered the weight and balance of it, until she could hit targets at range with something approaching competence. But at night, she still practiced with her blade. Old forms, ancient techniques, movements that had been refined over centuries of warfare that predated the galactic defense by millennia. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, patient and stern. A blade is only as good as the person holding it. You must be faster than their technology, smarter than their tactics. You must find the moment when everything else fails, and you must be ready. The night before the live fire exercise, Olivia sat in the quiet of the locker room, blade across her lap, thinking about history, about her great-great-grandfather cutting through a blast door to save Keller soldiers he had never met, about her grandmother defending colonists from raiders, about all the people who had carried this particular piece of metal and used it when everything else had failed. You are not sleeping, Morak said, appearing in the doorway. For someone so large, he moved with surprising stealth. Couldn't, Olivia admitted. Too much thinking. Morak sat down next to her, which made the bench creak alarmingly. May I ask you something? Sure. Why do you carry that blade? You have proven you are skilled with modern weapons. You could rely on technology like the rest of us. Why choose something so old? Olivia considered the question. Because it reminds me that humans have been surviving impossible situations for a very long time. Before we had plasma rifles or energy shields or starships, we had blades and our wits and the determination to not die quietly. That hasn't changed. The tools are different, but the principle is the same. You are saying the blade represents human resilience. I'm saying the blade is a reminder that sometimes the old ways work better than the new ones. Not always, but sometimes. Morak nodded slowly. That is wisdom. Among my people there is a saying. The strongest tree is not the one that grows tallest, but the one that bends in the storm and does not break. Humans bend well. We do, Olivia agreed. We're good at it. We've had lots of practice. The live fire exercise took place in what the Academy called the Combat Zone, which was a massive outdoor facility with varied terrain, real structures, and absolutely no safety protocols beyond a medical team on standby. Squad Theta was given their objective at dawn: infiltrate an enemy compound, retrieve intelligence data, and extract without being captured or killed by the defending force. The defending force consisted of 20 actual soldiers, veterans pulled from active duty for training purposes, equipped with weapons set to extremely painful but non-lethal settings. "This is going to hurt," Plex said, staring at the compound through his scope. "This is going to hurt so much." "Then do not get shot," Grix suggested. "Novel concept, I know." They moved in at sunrise, using the low angle of the light to mask their approach. Seth had already infiltrated the compound's security network remotely, giving them a map of guard positions and patrol routes. Triss used her vibration sense to confirm the data. Slowly, carefully, they worked their way through the outer perimeter. The first guard went down to Bexon's precision shot, a stun bolt that dropped her before she could raise an AV alarm. The second guard was neutralized by Torv, who had gotten frighteningly good at silent takedowns. They were inside the compound proper before the defenders even knew they were under attack. And then everything went sideways. The intelligence data was located in a central building, heavily guarded by 8 veterans who had clearly been expecting exactly this kind of infiltration. The moment Squad Theta approached, plasma fire erupted from every angle. Morak took 3 hits to his armor and went down. Triss was clipped by a shot that sent her tumbling behind cover. Plek was hit twice and spent the next minute screaming about how much it hurt. "We are pinned!" Grix snarled, returning fire from behind a concrete barrier. "We cannot advance, we cannot retreat, and they have us in a crossfire. Ideas?" "The ventilation system again," Torv suggested. "This is not a simulation," Seth said, his tendrils retracting from a nearby access panel. "I cannot affect environmental controls out here." "Then we need a distraction," Bexon said. "Something big enough to pull their attention while someone sneaks in." Everyone looked at Olivia. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," she said. "You are small, fast, and apparently incapable of dying," Grix said. "If anyone can get in there, it is you." "With a sword? Against 8 veterans with plasma rifles? You have a better idea?" Olivia did not have a better idea. She checked her rifle's charge, nearly depleted from the initial firefight. She had maybe 3 shots left. Not nearly enough. She looked down at her blade, still secured to her belt, and thought about her grandmother's voice. "Find the moment when everything else fails." This qualified. "Give me covering fire," Olivia said, "and pray to whatever gods you believe in, because I am about to do something phenomenally stupid." She burst from cover before anyone could stop her, running low and fast toward the central building. Plasma bolts filled the air around her, close enough that she could feel the heat. Grix and Bexon laid down suppressing fire, forcing the defenders to duck. Torv created a distraction on the left flank. It bought her maybe 2 seconds. She used them well. Olivia hit the building's side entrance at full speed, rolled through as plasma fire scorched the door frame behind her, and came up inside. 4 defenders in the room, all turning toward her, weapons tracking. She fired her rifle. 3 quick shots that took down 2 of them. The rifle's charge died. She dropped it and drew her blade. The 3rd defender fired. Olivia was already moving, using an overturned table for cover, then vaulting over it with a speed born of pure adrenaline and terror. She closed the distance before he could adjust his aim, blade finding the gap in his armor at the shoulder joint. He went down. The 4th defender was smarter. He backed away, maintaining distance, weapon up. Olivia didn't chase him. Instead, she grabbed a piece of debris from the floor and threw it at his head. He flinched, just for a second. That was enough. She closed the gap, struck his weapon hand, disarmed him, and delivered a strike that the simulation system would have registered as lethal, but in reality just hurt enough to make him reconsider his life choices. 4 down. 4 to go. She found the stairwell and went up, taking the steps 3 at a time. The intelligence data was on the 3rd floor according to Seth's map. The remaining defenders would be concentrated there, dug in and waiting. She burst through the stairwell door expecting resistance and found it immediately. 2 defenders, both firing the moment she appeared. She dove, rolled, came up behind a support pillar as plasma bolts chewed chunks out of the concrete. Her blade was in her hand, but she was pinned again, no way to close the distance without getting shot. And then the window exploded inward. Morak came through it like a meteor, having apparently climbed the outside of the building despite being shot multiple times. He landed on one of the defenders with the full weight of a Thrin in combat mode, which was several hundred pounds of muscle and bad attitude. The defender went down hard. The second defender swung his weapon toward Morak. Olivia was already moving, crossing the distance in 3 steps, blade striking with all the precision her training had given her. The defender's weapon clattered to the floor. He stumbled backward, hands raised in surrender. "You climbed the building?" Olivia asked, breathing hard. "Thrin regenerate quickly," Morak said, which was not really an answer, but probably the best she was going to get. They secured the intelligence data, a small drive that Seth could interface with remotely, and made for the exit. The remaining 2 defenders had regrouped in the ground floor, blocking their escape route. Olivia and Morak hit them from above and behind simultaneously, a coordinated strike that would have made Instructor Vax proud. Both defenders went down. Squad Theta extracted with the objective complete, 0 permanent casualties, and a time that would apparently go into the record books. Instructor Vax met them at the extraction point, datapad in hand, expression unreadable. "Cadet Reeves," he said, "walk with me." Olivia followed him away from the squad, heart pounding, wondering if she was about to be disciplined for something. Vax walked in silence for a moment, then stopped and turned to face her. "My grandfather asked me to give you something," he said. "If you graduated?" "I haven't graduated yet, sir." "You will." Vax reached into his uniform and pulled out a small box. He opened it, revealing a medal. It was old, the metal tarnished, the ribbon faded. "This belonged to your great-great-grandfather. He left it with my grandfather after the Battle of Titan's Ridge. Said he would collect it someday. He never did. But you are here now, and I think he would want you to have it." Olivia took the medal with shaking hands. On the back, engraved in letters almost too small to read, was a name: Marcus Reeves. "Thank you, sir," she managed. Vax nodded. "Your ancestors fought with honor, Cadet. You do the same. That is all any warrior can do." He turned and walked away, leaving Olivia standing there with a medal from a battle fought 80 years ago and a blade that had been there. Squad Theta graduated from basic combat training 6 weeks later. All 8 members passed, which was apparently unusual enough to merit a mention in the Academy records. They received their postings, their assignments, their places in the vast machinery of the galactic defense. On the last night before they shipped out, the squad gathered in the locker room one final time. Grix produced a bottle of something that was probably illegal in 7 systems. Plek complained about having to leave. Morak gave a speech about unity and strength that was surprisingly eloquent. Torv made jokes. Bexen tried to look tough and failed. Triss and Seth just smiled in their own ways. And Olivia sat among them, blade across her lap, medal pinned to her uniform, and thought about history. about how every generation carries forward the legacy of those who came before, about how old tools still work when used by skilled hands, about how humans might be small and fragile and temporary, but they were very, very good at surviving. "Hey, Reeves," Grix said, raising her glass. "To the human with the antique." "To the squad," Olivia corrected, raising her own glass. "To all of us." They drank and laughed and told stories that would probably be exaggerated by morning. And somewhere in the archives of the Galactic Defense Academy, a note was added to Olivia Reeves's permanent record. "Unconventional methods, exceptional results, carries a blade with history. Recommend for advanced tactical training." The blade, as always, remained sharp.